Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowden Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette, and our guest today, Martine Saint-Victor, communications strategist and columnist at the Montreal Gazette, and Marty Patrick. Can I call you Marty? Okay.
Please.
Okay.
You can call me Marty, too.
Can I? Okay. Marty and Marty are here today. Marty Patriquin, journalist, columnist now at The Logic.
That's right.
So for those of you who haven't checked that out, by the way, you should. It's really a great piece of journalism. So we're going to talk today about the Montreal election. Well, actually, no. We're going to talk about Valérie Plante and the fact she's not running in the next Montreal election. So, Marty, I want to start with you because you wrote about this week, and you said Montreal has a Valérie Plante problem, but that's really not what it is. You called Montreal, the government here, a clown car of a government. So let's dig into that first. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the argument I was making is that I was hearing a lot from, particularly from the business sector, about how much of a problem Valérie Plante was. And we got to do something about it. And the usual things were thrown at it, traffic, homelessness, rampant bike paths, or whatever. I found it really interesting that here's everybody complaining about her, but nobody was taking the time to basically go up and run against her. Nobody wanted to run against her. And we're a year away from an election. She's ran basically unopposed for the last 4. I take it that Ensemble Montreal has an interim leader, but it wasn't even really a party till last summer. So my point in the piece was, okay, we bitch a lot about Valérie Plante and all that kind of thing, but nobody's ready to step up. And then my idea was, well, maybe Montreal isn't as broken as social media suggests. So I went through the things. I went through unemployment numbers, housing starts. All sorts of things. We have a litany of problems. We have homelessness, as everybody says. We have traffic, as everybody says. It's more expensive to live here. But it remains that the city's actually doing pretty well. And I was sort of thinking, and my column was either really well-timed or really badly timed, that Valérie Plante is running unopposed because people realize that they can't beat her.
Well, now they can.
Yes, Valérie Plante fixed the Valérie Plante problem by stepping away. Mm.
But I want to reference this thing because I hear it being talked about now as well. If the idea is, this clown car of trying to run a city like Montreal, it has been pointed out for a long time. We have such a giant city administration here. Doesn't need to be that way. But then you think no one who would run for mayor is going to come in and say, I want to make government smaller. That's a losing proposition of every union in this city.
For the unions, but also just, it's sheer lethargy. Once you put a structure in place, it's very hard to get rid of, right? For good or ill, Projet Montreal is a creature of this, and Projet Montreal has figured out a way to govern a way that's basically ungovernable, basically making the best of a bad situation, and they've been pretty successful. And I was thinking about it the other day. In a lot of ways, it doesn't really matter to me as a citizen of Montreal who the mayor is, because it's so decentralized. My main point of contact is the l'arrondissement, is the area around me, and that has its own separate thing. So that's where I go if I have a problem with garbage, et cetera, et cetera. The mayor doesn't even enter into my conversation, which is very different than other cities.
A poll just came out, Martine, that said 54% of the population actually opposes her would oppose her, or happy about her stepping down, put it that way. Are you surprised?
There are a couple of things about what Marty said, that she's unopposed. I think part of the reason she's unopposed is because it's so difficult to hold public office.
100%.
It's draining. This is why she said, I cannot put another 4 years into this. And we had, Minister Fitzgibbon a month ago saying, I'm not motivated, it's a lot of work. And you have a series of elected officials who have been stepping down. This morning in La Presse, you have the mayor of Longueuil who said, I've had the same thoughts as Valérie Plante over the summer and it's tough. It's not only that it's 7 days per week, 24 hours per day, is that because of social media, the scrutiny is amplified, and it's not
brutal.
It's brutal, particularly if you're a woman. That's one thing. This morning in the Washington Post, Eugene Robinson has this great op-ed about the double standards between expectations of Donald Trump versus expectations of Kamala Harris. And I bring this on a municipal level because she's a woman. And I think eventually we're going to have to recognize what she's done. I'm a driver. Am I always super happy to see the path, the bicycle path. No, but I know this is the way forward. I think the green spaces, she said she was going to be a mayor of mobility. We have no choice. This is where we have to go. And this week, Rob Ford, Premier of Ontario, said, Doug Ford, I'm sorry, thank you. Doug Ford said, I'm going to, take out these bicycle paths on Bloor and on University. That's ludicrous.
I'm sorry, what?
That's ludicrous. He's going to break down. He's going to take off like the
I'm sorry, is it ludicrous that he wants to remove bike lanes from
Yes.
heavily traveled arteries? That's ludicrous?
I go to Toronto very often. On Bloor Street, it's a question of security. If you don't have these bike paths, you're going to have cyclists dying. And I think it's the way forward, Aaron. You don't have to like it. There are a lot
Okay.
of things I don't
I was
like.
on that bike path.
I just want to point out this idea that just because you bring up bike paths as an issue doesn't mean I don't like bike paths or I don't think they're necessary. But in the case of Bloor, for example,
Yeah.
and we have the same thing here on, I pick a street, Notre Dame, Saint Jacques, Saint Antoine.
Yeah.
If you want to build a bike lane, instead of building it on a heavily traveled major artery that has a lot of traffic, go one street over and build it on a street that's not. It still goes east to west or
Perfect.
north to south.
I can't argue that because I'm not an urbanist. But what I'm going to say is that as far as increasing mobility, that is a necessity when you're a big city.
Sure.
And this has to be reckoned because often when you hear the vitriol against Valérie Plante, it's people saying, "Well, she's so woke." First of all, people don't know what the word woke means.
Actually, doesn't
because-
mean anything.
Well, it certainly is not an insult. So that's one
But that's
thing.
the whole thing about the word for me.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Please.
I mean, this sounds like I'm talking over you, but
No,
wokeism to me has become such a catch-all phrase that it's lost all meaning. That's all
agree.
I'm saying.
But I agree with you. But it's so easy to say that. But in reality, and this is why I come back to the Washington Post piece about expectations. I think we would have celebrated a lot of what Valérie Plante has done had she been a man. This is not scientific. This is based on the criticism she's gotten. I think when we get to a point where, her laugh has become an issue, that is dumb.
Why do we care what she laughs?
Why do we care? And would we care if she had been a man? So I think
Well,
all
they'd
of
say the same about Kamala Harris or laugh too.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think where we have to, for the next mayor, if it's a woman, I think we have to be conscious of how we speak about elected officials because the media has influence. So there's this responsibility, and I'm not saying we can't criticize her. There's a grocery list of things she can be criticized.
100%.
And that's fair, but let's criticize what should be criticized.
Okay, so let's go to what you brought up, and I think this is something we don't recognize, social media. Where in the past you could have criticized a municipal official or whatever, you've shown up at a city council meeting.
That's it.
Now, of course, you have access through social media, you're anonymous, and you're right,
Yeah.
there is a lot of vitriol spread through social media. But when Valérie Plante was up in front of the microphone the other day and said, I don't have the energy to keep doing this job at the level to which I'd want to, something about that rings sort of hollow to me because I'm having to think, and we know in Quebec, for example, I think there's over 107 politicians who have walked away from posts, elected posts, because of the criticism they're getting on a regular basis on social media. How much do you think that actually, I mean, we're guessing, we're speculating, how much do you think that has to do or may have had to do with her saying, remember, she turned off the comment section on her page about a month ago, right? Right.
She had to because it was too violent. I don't think anybody goes into politics thinking it's going to be easy. Everybody that goes into politics knows it's going to be hard. But I think at one point when you're being called the B word and the C word and you're a mother constantly at one point and you're like, why am I putting up with this when I could be making twice the salary for 5 days work in the corporate world? I mean, right?
And there are two things just about that. First of all, social media does that. Yes, you have the benefit of being anonymous, and it's literally like being in traffic when you yell at somebody across. Like it's the same kind of thing. There's another aspect to it: is the ability that the fact that you were able to communicate with this public figure so quickly that it sort of gives you the idea that you have the license to do more. And my example is Christina Smith in Westmount. There's people showing up at her house, like talking to her kids. Like, come on, The other thing I'd say is I wrote a piece about Kevin Chan, who's an executive at Facebook a few years ago, and in the course of reporting that, I talked to Catherine McKenna, who was the environment minister at the time, and I'm like, you get this stuff, and I hear all the time that it's really bad for you. Send me all the stuff that you get sent. And her assistant was like, okay, dunk. And the stuff I read, it would make your
Vile, I've seen it.
And it's the repetition, but it's all obviously it's the content, but it's also the repetition, and it's just like, this is insane.
Yeah.
Like, it would make paint peel. And the worst thing, I do a fair bit of media. The worst thing that's ever been said about me is I'm fat. I'm like, well, I can lose weight. It's brutal what she went through.
And I would say about, when she said she didn't have the energy, it reminded me of right after COVID, where you had all these CEOs quitting because they felt like, well, we brought the company, I led it through this pandemic, I'm done, I'm exhausted. It feels a little bit like that because the city of Montreal is a corporation, right? It's a business. It's a small state, but it's also a business. So I think there's kind of probably a sense that she did a lot of what she wanted to do, and it's time for someone else. The timing is particular because, and I think one of the reasons why her departure is welcome. First of all, I think she did it with much dignity in her goodbye speech, but also it's because at the federal level we have someone who doesn't want to leave, and apparently most people want to leave. And
Who's that now?
Yeah, and at the provincial level, you have someone who people are getting tired of seeing. So when you have a politician who knows when to leave the party, and I always say knowing when to leave a party is an art form,
but
it's welcome.
We can't forget the fact that the Projet Montréal is a coalition of sorts, and we've had Valérie Plante on. She's a wonderful person to talk to. She's charming, she's smart, she's got a lot going for her. But I also know that there are a bunch of people in there that they're not all on the same page. Yeah. And a lot of the issues we have with the city, downtown, for example, construction's insane. It's not all on the city's fault, but nonetheless, there's a consultation process that never works. Yeah. Like, look at Mount Royal.
It works. It's just they choose to ignore it.
They choose to ignore it. Look at Mount Royal. She decided, like, in 2026, it's going to be turned off to cars. And, I mean, we're all for, like, the environment. We're all for... It's not going to help the environment. Mm-hmm. Things like this, downtown, like pushing parking meters to the brink to scare people away from coming. There's stuff like that they say they're consulting, but they're not. And I mean, I don't know who do we blame, but the fact is that change is necessary in a lot of levels, like housing, everything.
Except on housing. I wrote a column about this last August. According to CMHC, which is the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, Montreal is Montreal, and to a lesser extent Quebec City, outlier in the country as far as getting housing built. Montreal, what's the population of Ontario? What, like 14 million?
In Montreal?
15, 16 million?
In Ontario? In Ontario, it's about double Quebec.
Yeah.
That way. Quebec built 800 more housing units or housing apartment units, rental units this year than Ontario, and Ontario has double the population. Montreal has more housing starts. We're up 200% in June. Now, this isn't all Valerie. Like, don't give this all to Valerie Plante. We had a law change that allowed Montreal more autonomy to do this kind of thing, to approve stuff. But the fact is that the city has built more housing than anywhere else in the country.
But what we hear from developers is exactly the opposite. We're dealing with the administration saying, holy cow, it takes 3 years to get a permit to be able to put up a building. That's municipal, not provincial. So how do you square that circle?
I don't know what to say. I'm going by what the CMHC said. And the fact is what they said is housing starts are higher by upwards of 200% in June. Than the rest of the country, and we've gone up while the rest of the country has gone down a little bit. There is a certain disconnect. I'm not entirely sure how to explain that, but these are statistics from a government agency.
I bring that up because that's one of the issues that, brought up against Valérie Plante, the administration. There's so much red tape and so much bureaucracy, and that's probably borne out by the fact, as we started this conversation with, there are so many people as part of this government. It's not surprising that it takes so long to get something done.
Look at it, like we have almost as many demerged cities as we do merged areas.
Right.
Then we have that. Then we have the CMM around it. Infoman, Jean-René Dufault, he tried to map it out once just on a whiteboard. he ran out of space with like eight whiteboards. Like it's ridiculous. And to your point before, we have the same number of elected officials in Montreal as New York, Toronto, and Ottawa combined. And the idea that we're going to be able to get rid of those magically is just not going to happen, because once you put something in place, it's very, very difficult to get rid of.
Which has always been part of the problem in implementing policy and ideas, is there's so many people she has to please. I mean, you look everywhere, there's an issue our police force, I mean, she came in with the idea of like having a little bit of control so there's no racial profiling. A lot of things like that have not changed because she doesn't have that kind of power, yet with all these people around you would expect, but we're really like lacking in a lot of areas.
I would ask the question too, by the way. It hasn't come up, but I'm going to bring it up. And I read some of the comments posted on her, I guess it was on Instagram yesterday. She's with a little child in the Southwest Borough saying, I'm still going to be around. And the comments are, for the most part, congratulations, love you, love your work. Do you think there's an Anglo-Franco divide with people as far as Valerie Plante is concerned? Because I will tell you, calls I take on my show, they're 99%, I hate this, I hate that, I hate this about the worst mayor ever. That's an Anglo audience. Is it different on the French side?
For sure. I think. Well, she goes where the votes are, and there's more French people than there are English people. I think it's a simple political calculation. But you're right. I got a letter from the other day from someone who is like, can I have access to? We have a pretty solid paywall on our site, part of the business model. And she's like, can I have access to this? I saw your column. It looks great. She's completely incompetent and idiot. I'm like, well, read beyond the headline.
Yeah, that's not what you wrote.
You talk to a lot of certainly English politicians and people and English people in the city, and it's just like you got to, oh my God. But yes, there is definitely a schism between the English and French, I would say.
And yet I don't sense that as much as it is on a provincial level or federal level. I mean, I think she's been pretty good on that level. In fact, in terms of she deals with Anglos and Francos very nicely.
Yeah, and if you look at the other side, if you go like the mouth breathing nationalists who
well, she's not strong enough.
Martineau and all those people are like, no, you're destroying the French language. Like, well, so.
She gave Louise Arel a job. I mean, she's kind of taking small steps. There was a press conference last week. Yeah. Montreal now has an office for the French language. I mean, it's kind of hard to accuse her of, endangering French or not sticking up for French.
It's actually pretty easy, apparently.
Apparently, unfairly.
Yeah.
The point is, you can't please all the people all the time.
I was going to say, it's a reminder that she's not tequila. She can't make everybody happy. But I think this
I
moment.
like that, tequila.
Is it too early, by the way?
Never too early. I think it's a nice opportunity to kind of review how to manage Montreal I call it the Republic of Montreal, because when you look at federal and provincial elections, the results in Montreal are always so different. So Spike Lee calls Brooklyn the Republic of Brooklyn. Yeah. I call Montreal the Republic of Montreal. I think, I read this great book that's completely changed my view on the influence of mayor. It's Rahm Emanuel's book called The Nation City.
Oh, Chicago.
Yeah, and so he's now ambassador to Japan, and Rahm Emanuel was chief of staff to Barack Obama. But it's true that there are so many policies that can be implemented at municipal level where supposedly you have more autonomy and more power that then can trickle up actually to provincial and federal.
That's interesting.
And I hope our next mayor is going to have a business sense and a community sense, because the city has to be viewed and managed like the corporation that it is, married to the statehood that it can be.
So who's going to be our next mayor?
I have no idea. I think, Marty brought it up. Not many people have stepped up because it's tough. And then you have to, if you do get somebody from the business community, it's a pay cut. It's scrutiny they're not used to. That's not an easy transition.
And they don't have the power. They don't have as much power.
Yes.
They're not like
Not
a
yet.
drapeau before.
Well, there's been talk about Dominique Anglade, but you're saying no. You know her.
Yeah, I don't think so. I can't speak for her, but
Melanie Joly, she almost won it.
Melanie Joly wants to be Prime Minister of Canada. I think we have to
Lydia
recognize that.
Coderre wants to be a leader somewhere. But the point is that I don't see anybody stepping up.
yet.
Yeah.
There's a year, and I actually welcome a shorter campaign. I think we can learn from the States. We don't need a campaign that lasts forever. I think a 1-year campaign is fantastic. More than that, it's too long. I think everybody wants not necessarily a new generation. Experience matters, but and I hope we get a mayor that's going to reflect what the city is: vibrant, visionary, avant-garde.
47 different cultural communities.
It doesn't, and it doesn't have. If it's somebody who's from a different community,
Right.
great. Does it have to be? No. My dream is to have a Michael Bloomberg, right? Because I think what he's done for New York.
He
is
doesn't need the
fantastic.
money either.
And he doesn't need the money, so it makes a difference.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowden Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the hub of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus Carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowden Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowden Delicatessen. Do you think Montreal, maybe it's not a fair question, would ever be able to elect a non-francophone as mayor? Someone from another cultural community as mayor?
Yes, and yes.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
If it's going to, well, put it this way: if it's going to happen anywhere in Quebec, it's going to happen here.
Yeah, well, that's...
I mean, you have cities like Amos and etc. in the regions who have elected black mayors. So I think the first black mayor was elected in the 60s or 70s. So I always find these types of, and I get the question, but I always find them. It's a question you can't really answer. It's like
Right.
it's like asking in '69, is men ready to go on the moon? Well, yes, men is ready to go on the
Well,
moon.
you know,
We have-
there's still
Yeah, but-
the argument that men
but
really land
I'm
on
guessing
the moon.
the
We're
fact
not
that
dealing with that anymore.
she stepped down. She had someone in mind from within her own party because she's a very clever thinker.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say diabolical, but like she.
Yes, so that's
Well, you need an aspect of that.
Yeah, but I'm sure they had something in their minds that someone would step in.
Do you think so? Do you
Yes,
think that's the...
that to me is completely miscalculating Montrealers. You cannot force feed someone to Montrealers. You can't.
But they have someone in mind.
They might, but
They might,
it's not
yeah.
a shoe-in. It's not a shoe-in, right?
No, but
So-
you don't step
Well, yeah,
down.
but what I would say, just to counter that a little bit, you made the very good point before that Valérie Plante knew when to step up. So prior to 2017 when she ran, she knew when to step down. And I think part of stepping down, in the way that she did, is figuring out what your legacy is going to be and who's going to take that on. Now, is that official? Is it unofficial? But I'm sure they have someone who's just like, A,
Champion.
who's best to lead the party,
Right.
B, who's going to win election.
You know, there are a bunch of different theories as to why this idea of stepping down at the right time. One of them is that the city's in such bad shape financially that by the time 2026 or 2027 rolls around, they'd have to become, under the trusteeship of the provincial government. She knows this. There's actually a report out suggesting that. And maybe you don't want to have your name attached to finding out the city of Montreal, which is not allowed to run a deficit, right? You have to run a balanced
Right.
budget every year. You don't want to be the mayor associated with having to say the province stepped in because the finances here were so bad, and she knows this and why. Do you think there's a possible grain of truth to that?
Possibly. I have a few of the conversations I've had, even amongst Plante supporters, is that she isn't very careful with the pocketbook. It's one of the complaints that people will whisper to you, no names or anything like that. But yes, that they're not great at. They're great at visionary stuff. They're great at building stuff or having an idea to build stuff. Put it that way.
Yeah.
But the underlying what it costs isn't necessarily all it's
Like
considered.
$32,000 trees.
It should be
Exactly.
it should be more of a concern is their complaint than it is with the Plante administration.
If you had to guess, and obviously there have been a lot of names floated just since this all happened. Dominic Anglade's name was one of them. Denny Kader's name was there again. I mean, I think you could have a better idea than I did. It seems to me Denny Kader, who 3 months ago when he was here with us, was pretty sure he was going to win this thing, and then all of a sudden along comes Pablo Rodriguez, who now seems to be the odds-on favorite, although some people even think that he has no chance of winning. So does Denny Kader become a likely candidate, in your opinion, to run?
No.
3 times a charm.
No, I really do think that the city is going to yearning for a new generation. It does not necessarily in age, but in style, in vision. So I don't foresee an old school figure coming in. And I do think the person is going to hail from the business community if the business community steps up in backing that person, supporting that person. I think many people want to run but are unsure of the type of support they're going to get.
It's
Yes?
funny you say that. We had the co-leader of Quebec Solidaire on, Mr. Nadeau Dubois, and he kind of hemmed and hawed because we suggested, well, maybe you would be interested in this long term if this doesn't work out. And he didn't say no. And if they
Yeah.
were, and you know what?
Interesting.
He would do very well here because he's got that kind of charisma. But that's what you would need on that kind of level. And do you remember when we had him and we
Yeah.
kind of put him to.
And let's face it, Quebec Solidaire is sort of,
It's not going
under these
anywhere
days,
provincially.
So yeah, they're not going to.
Well, yeah, and to that point, Vincent Marissal hasn't
Yeah.
said no either.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, what's similar about those two candidates? Everybody we're talking about is from the left.
We're talking about for projet though, like
Yeah, so everybody, the potential candidates are always from the left. I spoke to Sarah Sasseville for that column I wrote, and I want to give a shout out to Sarah Sasseville, who has been doing God's work.
We know. We've had him
with
on as well.
Ukraine
He's terrific.
and trolling
Yeah.
the Russians across the street. It brings goosebumps. I'm so happy he's keeping it and keeps doing it. He's incredible for doing it. He is a very, very connected guy. Cultural communities, business communities, culture, big C culture in
big
Quebec.
supporter of downtown.
Big supporter of downtown, lives downtown.
Yeah, I know.
And he has a massive Rolodex, to use a very antiquated term. And he's managed to attract two people that he's trying to get, and one's on the fence and one's leaning towards yes from the business community. But that just shows you that a guy like Sarah Sasseville, who knows everybody, can only get two people.
Yeah. That's right.
To even consider the job.
Which really brings us back to where we started, to what your column is about. Who would even want to take on this monumental mess of a city that we actually happen to live in now and say, you know what, this is something I think I can turn around?
Yeah.
I mean, where are you getting that person? Who?
I don't know that it's a monumental.
I don't know. It's
mess.
monumental.
That
It's
hurts
not a
me.
monumental mess?
I love
hurts
this.
me when-
Okay, I want to get even away from bike paths,
Yeah.
right? Because I know that's sort of a non-starter.
Yeah.
But look around. I mean, I hear from people every day, maybe don't use the word monumental, but basically, this is a mess, that's a mess, they're not doing anything here, they're not doing anything there. That's a
again,
lot of work.
Yeah.
You just described every city,
Yeah.
every city in North America.
Have I?
Look at New York City.
Look at Denver. Denver is an extremely rich city, more richer than Montreal. They have a massive fentanyl problem. They have a massive homeless problem.
There's always something. I think there are cities.
We have the tendency to look at ourselves and go like, we're doing really
Yeah,
bad.
but we live in this city. We don't live in, so we look at the city around us and say, we need to be doing a better job. Why isn't the city doing a better
Yeah,
job?
I think I think we need to look at cities doing well that are the same size as ours. I think of Miami a lot, that has been transforming itself, and I lived there for years, so I think there are comparables. I think we should look at Miami and say we can do much better. We could be a Miami. I think when you have a project like Royal Mount that doesn't get support, it's embarrassing. Why aren't we supporting it? You don't have to go shopping there, but you have to recognize the business sense, what it could do.
You have a mayor, though, who, thank you for bringing that up, who was opposed and remains opposed to Royal Mount.
That's what I'm saying. So this is why, for me, the someone from the business community who has community sensitivity
Okay.
would be the perfect marriage. I don't think Montreal's a monumental mess. I agree with Marty. It has the problems that every other big city might have. There's a lot of room for improvement. I want to see a mayor who's going to say, we do good things, and these are the things we need to improve on because we're a world-class city. I want somebody who's going to come in with that vision that Montreal's a world-class
Jean
city.
Drapeau.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Coderre had in mind too.
I
Yeah.
I don't know. I pinch myself living here, man. I freaking
Yeah.
love it. I love it. I
Same.
travel a lot.
Hey, look.
I went to Toronto a little
all
while
of us
ago.
here,
Yeah.
but you're from Three Rivers,
That's right.
Trois Rivières,
That's
but
right.
like Aaron and I, we're all born here, lived here,
But I think
haven't moved.
I think there are things
Yeah.
that are embarrassing about Montreal that have nothing to do with municipal politics. I think the airport is embarrassing. It can call itself international because when you have more than 5-6 flights arrive at the same time, it's like
It's a rat maze.
yeah. So it's crazy.
Tell me.
I think
Yeah.
our roads are embarrassing. I think these
Federal, provincial.
Exactly. So we need someone who's going to be able to rally all these different levels of government and say, hey, we're a world-class city. I'm going to need you to step up.
But you see,
Right?
when you're talking like that, you're talking business people. Here, what works in provincial, federal, municipal are names, and for whatever reason, people are attracted
Results.
to.
Results
But they're
also,
attracted
yes,
to
of course.
charismatic kind of people,
Yeah.
and that's why we had a Coderre. That's why
I
Valerie
know. So
Plante.
this is the whole thing about charisma, if I may.
But you from the business side.
Yes, charisma is what? Seriously, I mean, we need to let go.
This is the way it is.
I know, but what L'Actualité had a top 100 list of the most influential people in Quebec, and part of the measurement is charisma. It doesn't mean anything. This is not a result.
This is who people vote for.
I think you're underestimating people. I think there's a switch. I don't think we need somebody anymore who's going to necessarily be a sweet talker, a great talker. Give me a plan. Tell me how you're going to do it, and you have my vote.
Maybe we have Justin come back here.
But that's someone with big ideas. I
No.
think that's probably something that
Yes.
would necessarily appeal to
I
voters
agree.
here, right? Big ideas.
I
Where are
agree.
those?
But there,
I don't know if it's Quebec per se or Canada in general, but Chantal, and this is one of the things that Chantal Lebel was on To the Montreal years and years ago, so 10, 12 years ago, and she made a very interesting point. She goes, she is a well-known columnist, is all over the place. She's had every single party approach her. I'm paraphrasing here. And the parties are like, she's like, well, do you know my politics? Like, I don't care about your politics. We need a name.
want you to-
Yeah.
We just need your name. La notoriété. And Serge Sasseville said the same thing to me the other day. He said, we need somebody who's well-known in the not just in the business community, but around that. I don't know if it's charisma. I don't think it's charisma. I think it's more notoriété.
But
Like the
so,
idea that
I agree, and this is where I come in. This is what I do in life. Communication. I think if you have somebody who's smart, who has a vision, then you build a campaign around them. Who knew of Barack Obama in
2006.
even before when he spoke at the convention.
2004.
And then what happened? They built a campaign around him. And he's a unique personality. He has everything going. Check. But I think we can find somebody who is not well known yet. The person has a year to build a campaign. A year to build a campaign. That's great. Let's go.
So you're suggesting, I'm just from what you're saying, I'm thinking Cole Caulfield. That's possible.
Let's go.
Right,
Let's
build a
go.
campaign around him.
Let's
People
go.
know him. Everybody likes him.
You know who I would love as a mayor? Ken Dryden.
just get him to move from Toronto.
I would love Ken Dryden.
he loves it here.
Because
Speaks great French.
for me, Ken Dryden is experience, it's sensibility, it's business sense, it's vision.
It's a name.
And it's a name.
And it's a name, but it's all this experience, right?
He'd get elected here in a second.
In a second.
Let's
Yeah.
look at the provincial level. Pablo Rodriguez
Yeah.
decides all of a sudden he's going to run. My guess is he'll probably win.
He loves the city.
Yes, but he's also a name. If you brought in a note like all the other guys, we've met a few of them
Yeah.
running. They're not names.
Yet, but again, this is where PR comes in, communication, get the message out, do the legwork, knock on doors, tell me how you're going to win me over, share ideas with me, tell me how Montreal's going to be better in 4 years, in 8 years, in 12 years. I mean, this is what people want to hear.
All right, we have to wrap up. I would just ask you both as a final question: optimistic or pessimistic in terms of who the next mayor is going to be?
Always optimistic.
Always optimistic because this is the best city in the world.
There you go.
And that's where we will leave it. Thank you both.
Thanks
Appreciate
very
it.
much. It was great.
Martine Saint-Victor, Marty Patriquin. We'll see you soon on the next edition of the Corner Booth Podcast.